Hello everyone. So today I'm joined by Matt Jarvis. Matt has enjoyed over 200 appearances at Premiership level, in addition to experience on an international England stage. So Matt, very warm welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much for inviting me on.
No, you're very welcome. Now, I know you've spoken about your life story on a number of occasions, but what I'd really like to do today is to sort of delve into the topics, specifically with you around kind of performance and resilience and really kind of identity as well a little bit, if we may. So just to sort of start us off, take me back to your childhood, because you came from, I think, a very sporty background. Is that correct?
Yes, but not the sport you would probably think of. Both my parents were England #1 table tennis players, which I still look back and can't believe, really. They were both England internationals. So they didn't necessarily push me. I've got an older brother as well, so they didn't necessarily push us into table tennis, but we were definitely into sport from a very early age. Even though it's a different sport, I think we sort of picked up on a lot of the I suppose training habits and mentality that goes with it. I certainly did, and we were straight into everything. I did football, swimming, athletics, cross country, anything really. And now I have kids, I understand why we were out the house into training camps as such. But I absolutely loved it.
I was going to say, looking back, because at the time, presumably kind of growing up in that environment was very normal, but kind of looking back, do you appreciate elements of that upbringing that was perhaps special or different to, what your friends experienced?
I do look back, and the thing is, I suppose for me, is people look at it and go, God, I did football, swimming, athletics, I did one, maybe two things a night after school, every single day, Monday to Sunday, and they say, oh, well, you didn't really have a childhood, did you? I was like, well, absolutely. I loved my childhood. I loved it. I did everything that I was possibly wanting to do. Yes, I was one, as I got slightly older, I was the one that turned up, to a someone's birthday party on a disco on a Friday or a Saturday night. I'd turn up about 9:30, 9:45, stinking of chlorine, coming straight from a swimming gala, ready for the last dance, that sort of thing. But I wouldn't have had it any other way. I really enjoyed it.
We had a guest on the podcast recently, Adam Wilkie, who was the son of Sir David Wilkie, who was an Olympian, and he was sort of talking about sort of not really understanding or kind of appreciating what lessons he was learning being the son of somebody who was an elite athlete. Do you get a sense that there were any sort of standards or kind of behaviours that were somehow ingrained in you, with parents that came or were already operating at that kind of sports level?
Yes. I mean, they both retired before they had me and my brother.
Okay.
So we didn't necessarily see them training and they ran their own business after that, so it was a different environment. But I think mentality, I remember specifically, when I was in the younger days, when I was just at Gillingham, for instance, it's like 16, 17, just basically being told, remember from my dad just being like, you don't have to worry about any of this, contracts, money, whatever it is, you just work hard, everything else will come, and that sort of, I suppose, in my mind, I never really did my whole career. There's obviously different parts when you're negotiating or whatever, but I'd never really, my whole purpose was never about money. It was always about playing and trying to be the best that I can be, and trying to eke out every little bit of, I'd never wanted to look back and think, if only I'd have just done this, if only if I'd worked harder, if only if I'd just practiced a bit more. I can look back, there's things that you wish could have happened maybe, but I can look back with no regrets on my own standards that I set for myself, and that I couldn't have trained harder. I couldn't have, if I didn't do this, I could have done this. I don't have any of them. So that's quite a refreshing thing to be able to look at. And I think that is, part of upbringing.
Yeah. So how did you go from you were doing athletics, you were a swimmer. How did you get into football?
Football was always my number one.
Okay.
Always my number one.
Okay.
That was my thing that I always, as a kid, wanted to play. Always wanted to play football. But all of the other things that I did made me a better footballer.
Okay.
The stamina, the fitness, the athletics, was sprinting, cross country, stamina, and just physically. I was never the biggest. So I was as a kid, I was very small, skinny.
Yeah.
But all of these other like sports that I did
Yeah.
built everything around it.
Do you think that sort of holistic kind of training that you were getting, being involved in all those different sports, really was a benefit? And do you think that maybe these days that we encourage our children to specialise a little bit too early in one sport or another?
100%. Yeah. For me, I got to probably 14 that I was like, my athletics coach and my cross country were like, you're not a cross country runner anymore.
Okay.
You've now got quads and calves, and
Okay.
you're now a footballer. But up until that point, and swimming, as I said, I'm not the tallest, but I was a good standard. I was Surrey champion. I was 0.01 away from a national qualifying time at breaststroke. So I was a decent standard. So I loved all of that, but football was always my number one.
Yeah.
And I've got kids now, and I would get them to try everything rather than just push them down one. Try everything, because you get so many different skills and different, I suppose, mentality shifts in all different sports that it's gonna benefit you in the long run with anything that you do, not necessarily in sport.
Yeah. And so talk to me the point at which you joined Millwall and you started to really focus then on football. Was that a transition point from becoming a sort of, or being a sporty kid into being a footballer? Was that, I don't know.
No. So I joined Millwall at 9.
You were 9? Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was young.
Yeah.
So I still, I had to train Tuesdays, Thursdays. I play on a Saturday or a Sunday, depending on what age group you played in on the weekend. So I still swam, still did athletics, still did all of that on the Monday, the Wednesdays, Fridays, Saturdays. I would go from a football match to an athletics meet in the afternoon and a swimming gala in the evening, and the same on a Sunday.
Yeah.
But you don't get tired as a kid.
No.
So I don't think that only sort of came in really when I got a little bit older.
Okay.
I think 13, 14 for me was when I was still training. I got to when you're, I think it must have been 13, 14. I started getting day release on a Wednesday from school, and I used to go in and train with the older kids on a Wednesday. And then I had to catch up my work in between other sessions. But that was more than you start focusing, streamlining, I suppose, onto football.
Yeah, I remember when we spoke just in the kind of run up to this that you talked about the kind of culture of Millwall, and perhaps that you didn't necessarily kind of feel completely at home there. Is that just sort of talk to me about that?
Yeah, I suppose so. As I said, I was maybe the quiet kid. It was quite a thriving atmosphere at Millwall. If you can imagine back then, the club as a whole, everything. I was coming from Guildford, going into Southwark Park or all of these different training centres to then come in, and then I was up in doing day release, going into the training ground in Bromley, and I think, as I said, when I individual sports, I could thrive. When I was in team sports, there's different personalities, different pressures, different everything. And I found myself confidence dip a little bit. And as a wide player, that's where you need to express yourself. And I think I maybe didn't do as well as I probably necessarily could have. And ultimately, that's probably why I got released and got told I wasn't good enough, and the rest is I suppose history. But it was something that I was absolutely devastated at as a 16-year-old. To tell you've been there for 7 years, to then get told you're not good enough was heartbreaking.
Yeah, and sort of getting released from a kind of performance centre it's a story that I've heard many times, and often for many people that is then the end of their kind of playing career. But for you, it wasn't. So what at that point kind of kept you going, and how did you then make it? Because you ended up at Gillingham.
Gillingham, yeah.
Gillingham, yeah.
Well, I was lucky to a degree, because when I got released, we played on a weekend. You played a game, and then actually me and my dad went into the meeting straight after in the, I think, change room with the 4 coaches. And when we come out, they'd obviously spoken to clubs to say which players they were going to release, I would imagine. And because outside the door there was a Gillingham scout called Burley Dillon, who was outside and was like, look, we'd love you to come. We've got a game tomorrow. We've got training. We've got this. Come down. And I said no. It was too hard for me at that time. I was 16. I hadn't processed. I couldn't process it. And I remember the journey home was awful with my mum and dad. I was devastated in the back. I was like, I just want to play locally with my mates. I don't want to do it really. And looking back now, it's just because it was raw. It took me a while, and I all of these things throughout my whole career, with disappointments and setbacks and everything, I genuinely feel like you do need to actually stop and go, yeah, this is awful. And you can be angry, you can be sad, you can be devastated, whatever it is. But then you've got to turn that switch and go, right, here we go. But it took me a lot longer at 16. It took me 2 weeks.
Okay.
And luckily for me, Bernie, the Gillingham scout, kept on calling. And then it was 2 weeks later, I then went on trial. And I wasn't great. Confidence was still low. But I started to show glimpses in games. I think I played about 4 or 5 games. And again, as I said, I didn't play as well, but I must have shown little glimpses. And then I remember getting the message saying, they've offered me a YTS, which was a youth team contract at the time. And it was just like, wow.
Yeah.
And then that was it.
What do you think there was, or what did you learn perhaps from the Millwall experience that you then were able to apply going forward?
I also think that, when you don't get something, your realisation is how much you want it.
Yeah, okay.
And I also, confidence is huge. And in all the other sports, individual sports, I had it. And I had it when I played for school as a team game, because I was a winger. But in school I played centre mid. I was the one that would, game would start. I go, right, they're playing this, right, everyone do this. I would shout and scream, do all that. But when it came to the match, I suppose, is with Millwall, I wasn't that sort of a player. I was a lot more shy, a lot more. Didn't want to. There was lots of personality in that and that whole environment, and I maybe wasn't able to express that. Whereas once I then signed at Gillingham, the confidence comes back because you've been offered a contract. I then moved away from home. At 16, I was living in digs, so that you grow up pretty quick as well.
And getting that confidence back, because obviously you suffered that big disappointment when you got released from Millwall. So did that? I guess, does that come from the kind of belief that you can still do it, or was it you started to see, or you started to kind of get validation in terms of the performance that you were doing at Gillingham?
I think everything.
Yeah.
It all comes under one umbrella.
Yeah.
Because, you can have one good training session and automatically you're like, wow, yeah, that was good. I feel much more confident in myself. You can have another bad one and you're like, oh. So you start building up a bit more of a system inside your mind of, right, you don't want to be too high, you don't want to be too low. You just keep that middle ground, whereas expectation levels and you playing games, and I was starting to do well. The team was doing well. We did well in the FA Youth Cup. We played a year up the first year, and then in our year we beat Liverpool at Anfield. We beat, I think it was Watford at home. And then we lost to Blackburn. Otherwise we'd play Man United in the next round. So that gives a bit of confidence in yourself, but also the team. And my teammates were great, so I felt comfortable in that environment as well.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by this sort of idea of kind of what makes a team really work and what doesn't. And obviously at Millwall you had some challenges, perhaps sort of feeling really part of that, whereas at Gillingham you felt more engaged perhaps. What was it about that team that kind of created the conditions where you could perhaps perform at the level that you wanted to?
Yeah, I think all the way through, I've been very fortunate. Gillingham, Wolves, West Ham, Norwich, like Woking, and Walsall, I suppose. So I've been in some really good groups of squads. Yeah. I think when you're younger, it's hard to process and to find out your own place in a team.
Yeah.
And what you're about and what you are as a person. I think for me, when I was at Gillingham, I was young, I was fresh, I was eager to learn. I was determined to do well, and then you get opportunity. Training in the youth team was great and playing the weekend, but then because you trained in the same training ground as the first team and the reserves, or they had a reserve team as well. So if someone dropped out training or they needed someone, they'd just call over and you get that chance to go up and train with the reserve team or the first team, and you'd be like, oh, this is amazing, and then you get a feel for it, and then you'd be eager for more, and just that. I think the pathway for me as well at Gills, you could feel like you could see players that have been in your like the year before, the year before that, they've got into the first team, and you can be like, oh, I could get that opportunity. And they're a really good group of players in the first team at that time. They were a lot older, I would say. I'd say a lot were like around the 30s, 31, 32. And then you had a couple of youngsters thrown in there as well. So when I got my opportunity in my second year in the youth team, I went on pre-season tour with the first team.
Okay.
And they looked after me as well. Like, I played well, but they looked after me as a group. And I think I was able to then sort of gain a bit of trust, a bit of, bit of something that they've watched, and they go, actually, no, he's a good player, he's a good kid. And they looked after me on that side of things. And then I got my opportunity to go and really play, and then go into the first team and play at 17. And then you realise that actually there's so many other factors that go on. And it's not just that you want to win the game. But you then financials come into it. Players need, if you don't win, there's mortgages, there's bills, there's all of this. And that
I remember
becomes
you mentioning that to me. How did you deal with that step up in pressure? Like, what was was there any work you were doing specifically at that time beyond, outside of the pitch, really to kind of deal with that?
I think when you're that young, if you look at players now, they get into the first team, they've got no pressure because they haven't had any experience. And that's why they thrive, because there is no, if you make a bad mistake, it doesn't matter, because generally, if you do that in youth team, it doesn't really matter. It's all about your performance and growing. When you get into the first team, make a mistake, they'll be like, yeah, it's fine. But then actually, when you're in the first team, make a mistake and someone scores, you get punished, because that means you don't get a win or a draw. Win, lose or draw in the youth team doesn't matter. It's all about trying to progress. In the first team, it's not about that at all. You need that result. So that's where you grow up pretty quick and understand that I need to chase that fullback back, because if he scores and it's my man, I'm going to be in serious trouble. So that is a wake up call.
How are you dealing with that? So
honestly, you at that particular time, you're learning on the job.
Okay.
I think for me, I was free. I had no worries about that. I was living away from home. I was getting paid peanuts, but I was playing football. And that was my whole reason for being away from home, was to play. So I genuinely loved being on the pitch and having that thrill. My role in the team was to entertain, to create opportunities and score goals. That was my role. So every time I got the ball, you could feel the crowd lift off the feet, and I would be like, I can't turn that down. I loved it. I loved that thrill. So when you then did, and again, because I was young and in that team, that was my role. So if I gave the ball away by trying, they wouldn't mind. To a degree. I couldn't do it every time, but so you felt like that's what they wanted you to do anyway. So I sort of felt that was how I had to play. And then you then realise in certain aspects, right, if I give the ball away there, that's not going to be ideal. So you learn quite quickly whereabouts on the pitch you can do certain things. But it is, I had some, I've both my parents, my family, my brother, like everything about that we're close. And if win, lose or draw, I would be able to speak to them, and they would obviously have that moulding to be able to, I said, not manipulate, but to give me a much better view and the longer process of everything, rather than the quick losses or the quick wins.
I wonder if sometimes there's a danger that we kind of over romanticize what performance is, because for you, what you're kind of saying, I think, is that for you turned up and you did the work and you were having a great time, and that kind of delivered performance. Is that fair?
I would say that to start with, 100%, because you've got no fear. As young kids going into a first team and into any club, you don't have that fear factor. It's only a year down the line, 2 years down the line, where now the expectation level has risen. That's why you look at all of these players that have come up. They first couple of years they're flying, and then there's a little pushback, because actually the expectation is so high now that you've performed at that level. Now the expectation is you have to do that every week. And then when you don't do it, you don't get that, oh, he's young, he's just got in the team. No, it's like you've been here 2 years now. The expectation is you do that, and if you make a mistake, then you're going to get
and what's
punished.
that like, that expectation week in, week out of having to perform at that level? Again, how do you deal with that?
It's hard because it's like being on a hamster wheel, because you get put on the hamster wheel and it spins and you go from Saturday game, Tuesday game, Saturday game, Tuesday game, and you're constantly spinning, and you don't really get off. So you're constantly in this thing of, right, played well, played bad, played okay, next game, and you're training, and you don't really get an opportunity to look back and go, right, that was good, or oh, I didn't do very well. You have a small window after the game if you reviewed a game, and then it's like, right, that's gone, on to the next. So you're constantly pushing yourself for the next game, for the next thing. So for me, that was how I tried to, I would beat myself up after a game if I didn't play very well. And, I know so many players that are able to just switch it off and go, right, football's done, now it's back to family or whatever, and you just forget about it. Whereas I found it a little bit harder to lose that. I held on to it a bit too long. But again, I think that comes with age and experience and being able to deal with it, towards the middle, when I was at Wolves, and then the rest of my career, you then have sports psychology that comes into play, and then you can start understanding a lot more why you do certain things. And I was very lucky as well. My wife and her mum's a psychotherapist.
Oh, perfect.
And so my wife's is very much mother's daughter. And I was able to I was one that wasn't really, I wouldn't necessarily open up and talk, I suppose, especially younger. So she was able to eke a lot of that out of me, which definitely helped within sport, because you're very much you're closed book. You just try and focus and get going.
And when it's sort of week in, week out, you're kind of evaluated based on presumably the last game, and you're only as good or not
as your last game.
Exactly. Yeah. So during that period, how do you stay connected to kind of what your standards are and who your sense of self is? When potentially this week you're loved and next week you're not loved.
Yeah. Well, throughout my whole career, and I think as a person, I've always been, I always say to my son now, like, don't be a sheep, be your own person. Because you can follow in all these different. You have to be true to yourself, and I've always lived like that. I think, as far as I can remember, I've always sort of lived like that. Yes, you want to fit in, and you do certain things to fit into different situations, which is absolutely fine. But you still stay true to yourself. And for me, that my whole life was, I work hard. If things weren't going well, right, I'd work harder. I'd go in earlier, go out and train in the morning, or do stuff afterwards. And then you start having standards for yourself, and that's what people associate you with.
Yeah.
And that's a huge part of what I've done.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep that up, because there's days where you just like, I don't really feel like I can be bothered to do this, and they're the most important days to keep going. Because there's that certain sense of purpose afterwards. I think that you've gone and done it and you really didn't want to do it. And these little 1%ers, I say they are, little 1%ers that you do add up across the whole of a season, and then 2 seasons, 3 seasons. They really do.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, because we've talked a lot in this podcast about, sort of belief and purpose and resilience and stuff, but there's never any substitute for doing the work. I think, that's
Everyone
the reality.
says, oh, you're so lucky. No, I'm not lucky. Yeah. I've worked extremely hard. The sacrifice that I had as a kid to just, yes, I loved it, but it was still, I missed out on so many parties, friends going out and doing everything. No, I didn't go, because I was working, I was training, I was going to this competition, I was doing this. I didn't necessarily feel like I was missing out, but I did. That the sacrifices that most people go through to get to the elite level, they're huge.
Exactly. And I imagine there's lots of people who would love to be in your position, but probably very few people that are willing to do the work and to take the sacrifices.
You hear so many stories. Oh, well, I was this when I was young. Well, yeah, but you weren't, because you didn't set yourself up. You didn't put in the hard work. You didn't dedicate your life to it. And that's, unfortunately, that's the real truth. But there is luck comes into play, being in the right place at the right time, but you've still got to perform.
Yeah. And how were you in the right place and right time? Because you went from Gillingham to Wolves. So when did that transition happen?
Yeah. So interestingly enough, I got I made my debut at Gillingham because there was an injury, and so that's how you get. I mean, that's how everyone gets an opportunity.
Right.
Someone can't play, so someone else has to come in, and that's how I got my opportunity. And then I played. I played 25 minutes, absolutely half an hour. I loved it. It was against the best team in the league. It was against Sunderland, and they won the league that season. So it's like you get a feel for it and you love it, and then I got pulled out, and then injury came back, and then I got my opportunity again a bit later, and then you sort of get drip fed in, and then. How did my opportunity come is because I was playing really well for Gillingham. I was in the team of the year, PFA team of the year. I played a game for Gillingham against Sunderland at the Stadium of Light. And at the time I had a hernia. I could hardly train. I was 18 years old, I think. I'd already had a hernia the year before. And then I'd only had one side done, and then the other side went the following year. So I was 18, I had hernia, and I really struggled. I couldn't train. So, but we were in a situation at the club, and I was hardly training, but then playing on a weekend. And then it got to, I think I trained on a Friday and then played on the Saturday. And my last game before I had the operation that next week was against Sunderland, and I played really well. I played about 75 minutes. I played really well. And Mick McCarthy was the manager of Sunderland, and obviously I played really well, and he remembers that game because then in the summer he then got the Wolves job.
Okay.
And then that following year he then signed me, and when I went and met him, I actually flew out to Portugal to meet him because it was end of season. And I flew out to Portugal, and he remembers, he sat me down and he was telling me what he was doing at Wolves and why he wanted me to join. But he was like, I remember that game that you played against us and you ripped up right back and you did really well. And so specific games can mean certain things. And yes, that one triggered and he saw me, but then he followed my career after that as well. Yeah. So specific moments in your career make certain things, but that was a huge part.
Yeah, and I think you've spoken really fondly about your time at Wolves. So again, I'm interested in what was it about the dynamic of that team specifically that, you responded to so well?
The manager, for starters.
Yeah.
He was he is the best manager I've worked with.
And why do you say that?
Because he's honest. He tells you good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay.
He's on the training field every single day. So his work ethic, his standards were what I had.
Yeah.
And the team around him, his assistant managers, we had a guy called Taff, Ian Evans, and then we had Terry Connor, who was instrumental in developing me as a player. He would take me out early, take me out after training, really wanted to just help him become a better player. And then you had fitness coaches, physios. I had Tony Daly, who was my fitness coach, who was a winger, same sort of style of play as me a little bit. Was England player, super fast, cutting, shoot, dribbles, and then he would then work on me in the gym. He would work on me like fitness wise, sprint wise to boost that. And then it was the rest of the squad. We had a lot of young, hungry players that had never been at the top level. We were in the Championship at the time. We had a couple of older players. We had someone called Jody Craddock, Gary Breen when I first went there. They'd been there and done it. And they were top pros. So it wasn't like they would mess around in training. They would be on it every day.
Yeah.
And then that's, again, what I say about standards and leadership. And that comes from that.
Yeah.
And then you had the rest of the group was all about hunger, desire. Yeah. Obviously you enjoyed yourselves as well. I was 20 years old. I moved up to the Midlands with my girlfriend at the time, wife. And yes, we had a great time, but did we work hard? Absolutely. And we had that desire to go and be the best.
I love that. Yeah. So standards, work hard, energy and that kind of shared purpose that you're all just aiming at kind of one outcome.
And it all comes within the group because, yes, you know, there's certain positions you want to play, you don't want the other player to play because you want to play, and there's all of that. But it all comes with the manager as well, and his being able to control that environment. And if you didn't play, he would still make you feel like you're part of the team. But again, it was that one purpose for all of us to get promoted.
And you did get promoted.
And we did get promoted, we won the league as champions in the second year. And then you get to the elite level and you get to the Premier League. And then that's a different kettle of fish. But for me, I think I actually thrived more in the Premier League than I did in the Championship. I loved that thrill of playing against the world's best players every single week, and the style of football and the pace of the Premier League and everything, I think, suited me.
I was going to say, what did that experience of kind of, you know, kind of playing in the Premier League, what did that give you? What do you remember most about that?
I think the biggest thing, if people ask you what's the difference between the Premier League and the Championship, in the Championship you get less time on the ball. Because as a wide player, if I received the ball, the fullback would be on me, kicking you like right, but it would be easier to do something with it. So when I say that, it's like I could then just flick it round him or get it and knock it past him and I'd be away. Whereas in the Premier League, you just get, you get a little bit more respect. So when you would receive the ball, you'd probably be able to have a touch and turn maybe, but then it'd be so much harder to get past the fullback because he'd be quick, he'd be strong. If you knocked it there, he'd be able to block. If you then went to cross, he'd be in the right position to block the ball. If you knocked it up the line, he'd be able to be there. So you get more time on the ball, but it's harder to do something with it. And then because I was lucky, I was quick. That was one of my attributes. So pace is a massive gift, I suppose, in any sport. But for me in the Premier League, I was quick, so that was a big advantage for me. And then I learned and figured out the best ways to go about it. So I was both fitted at this point now, so I could cut inside to shoot, I could knock it up the line to cross, and then a little body feint. I wasn't really a tricks person. I suppose I was a bit more direct. I'd knock it, run. Michael Gray came to Wolves and he simplified it for me. He said, he goes, run fast, score goals. That was his thing. But it was, I simplified it, tried to make it as simple as possible because there's so many, I say about controllables, there's so many things that come on. We haven't even mentioned media duties, being in the Premier League spotlight.
What was the hardest thing about that? Because it is a different kind of context, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that was I loved it. You know, I think, you know, you either like it or you don't. I really enjoyed it. You know, a lot of people would say now you like to be in front of the camera, you like to do that. I did. I enjoyed it. But it doesn't come without its pressures. And it's, you know, you're in the spotlight now. You're playing Premier League football. Not everyone knows you, but you really are in the media a lot. And you're scrutinised. I think that's one of the things that I'd noticed a bit more. Because obviously before that you sort of only see the good things because you're playing, or you know, even if you weren't necessarily playing, you weren't getting too much criticism. Whereas then when you go into the Premier League, then it's magnified.
One of the things I'm interested in, because we've had footballers on the podcast before, and you know, there's been incidents perhaps in their career where they've perhaps fallen out with fans or the media or a manager, whereas you have adapted in many different instances and almost seem to kind of never fall out with people. You know, you've had a great reputation, I think, through your playing career. How did you, again, sort of stay true to perhaps who you are and who you wanted to be?
What I would like to hopefully say is just the standard that I held for myself, and everyone held me accountable for that.
Yeah.
I think, you know, because I do. It's nice to hear that, but I do feel like I have that, I suppose, respect within football, within players, within coaches, because of, I suppose, my attitude, the way I go about things. Hopefully, obviously, performances as well. But I think just as a person, I think that's a nice thing, and that's why I say about trying to be true to yourself. I'd be in situations like everybody else, but I'd maybe make a different decision to some people.
Yeah.
And I think that's ultimately where you have your path, and you've got to decide which way you go. But yeah, it's tricky and it's tough because because you're young. I'm in the Premier League at what, 22 years old. It's you're young, you make some silly decisions sometimes. You get the opportunity to go out. You get you're probably getting paid more than you are getting paid more than the other 22-year-olds that your friends or whoever in the world. So you get opportunity, and then it's about making the right decision when you get that opportunity. And some people get it right, some people get it wrong, but you just got to try and maneuver your way through it as best you possibly can, staying as true to yourself as possible. But it's hard because you go into a change room, someone's got new trainers, and you're like, oh, look at your trainers, they're awful. Blah, blah. They get hung up in the change rooms with your clothes that you're wearing, and socks have been cut, shoes have been taken the laces out of, all of these things. And then you're like, oh, I've got to step up. I had a little Ford Fiesta to start with, then I had a Peugeot 206. And then I was in the change rooms. I was like, I can't have a 206 now. I need to get a better car, But then you're like, why? Why do I need to? But yeah, so there's so many other factors that get put in front of you, and it's just opportunities as well.
And it was when you were at Wolves that the opportunity to play for England came up. Is that right? What age were you when that?
At 24.
At 24.
Yeah. I was the first player since Steve Bull, which is like 30 odd years, to play for England while at Wolves. And do you know what? It was amazing for me, that, because I felt like the whole club was behind me. Well, they were, but it was like they all experienced it with me because they hadn't had a player that played for England. So it was like everything was just such a nice journey for me. They're all rooting for me, all pushing for me to get in the England squad.
Yeah.
And obviously I was playing well, but we were still fighting relegation. So it's not like all the other players in the England squad were, fighting for titles or European spots. I was fighting for relegation. So very different. And I didn't know any of the players personally that were in the squad. Obviously, I played against them, but I didn't know any of them personally. So it's like, that first day back at school, really, when you don't really know where to sit, where to, on the bus or in the canteen or wherever it is. But what an incredible experience.
Who describe that England squad that you were part of?
So Fabio Capello was the manager, who obviously his track record as managing all different teams was phenomenal. So to be called up by someone like that as well was a huge honour for me, even though he didn't speak much English. It was a huge honour. As I said, my situation, we were fighting relegation when everyone else is fighting for European places. So that was incredible for me anyway. John Terry was the captain. You had Wayne Rooney, you had Lampard, Ashley Cole, best fullbacks played in the Premier League. That's Crouchy, Defoe, Darren Bent. There's some ridiculous wingers. They had Stuart Downing, Ashley Young, Aaron Lennon, James Milner.
And you talked about those players in some respects were in a different position to you at the time because you were at Wolves where you're fighting relegation. Did you feel like you belonged immediately, or,
No, I mean, you have, in every single training session, you have to show why you're supposed to be there, and you're on that first training session, that first touch, you're getting scrutinised, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent.
Okay.
And that's the same whatever club you're at. Whenever you go to a new club, whether a new person signs at your club, them first few moments, people, they make an opinion of you. So yeah, that's difficult. Did I feel like I felt like I wasn't comfortable? No, because it's my first experience. I was playing well, but I'd not played in any of the England youth teams. None of them. A lot of these players had been in, under 17s, 18s, 19s, 21s, then got into the first team. I'd not experienced any of that. Yeah. So it was all new for me. And then obviously you get thrust in front of the media, having to do press conferences. So much about that. So that's all trying to take it in your stride, but that becomes a huge part of it as well. But I was desperate for the training to start because when I first got there, I had to do media because it was my first trip. Gush got called out. So you want to sort of get that done and don't say anything silly.
Yeah.
And then you just want to get into the training. And once you're into the training, then you're like, you put it in your mind, you just think they're just going to be I can't train with them. But once you get in, you're like, actually, okay, this is just what I've been doing every day. I know what I'm doing. And you realise that they're normal people. They're all the same. And once you get into training, that's your comfort zone. That's your comfort blanket.
Yeah.
And then you, obviously, outside of that, then you start, you have like downtime and you start playing games or having dinner or whatever it is, having a coffee. And then you start to get to know everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important as well.
Yeah. What's interesting is, and this again is something we've explored a little bit on the podcast, that people assume that when you're playing at that level, you are doing so in the absence of any kind of, self-doubt. But essentially, what you're saying is you do have that doubt, still at that level, because that was definitely another step up. But you just, I guess you're relying again on the fact that you've worked hard, that you have these standards, and that's how you faced into that.
Yeah. I mean, that training session, that first one's probably the most nervous I've ever gone into any training session. But it is. But you the whole time is I think my fallback is right. Work hard. And so I would like, any sort of drill or something, I'd try and do it as best as I possibly could. And you try and do it that way. That's how I sort of worked myself up. And I said, well, if I've done that to get to here, I'm obviously doing something right. But there's no substitute for going into that arena. And any doubts that I don't necessarily feel like I was the most confident player at all when I was playing well. Obviously, but I think if I had that arrogance of and I say that in a positive way, of like a Ronaldo as a player, someone like that, could I have maybe eked a bit more out? I don't know, maybe, because I maybe held myself back a little bit in some parts because I was just not that. I wasn't that person, but I was so many other parts. But maybe that self-confidence part, I probably maybe could have been a bit more. But that's a really difficult skill to have when there's so many other things that are going on.
And what I'm interested in is that, obviously the World Cup's on at the moment, you're sort of watching the teams, and I think probably I automatically assumed that these were players that had been playing together for sort of years and training together for years, but that's not the case, is it? And I'm just really interested in, when you are suddenly thrust into an arena at that level with players that you don't really know or you haven't trained with that much or haven't played with, how does that kind of team come together so quickly?
Well, it's difficult because you have not necessarily in one, like for instance I was in, because that was I sort of come into it and everyone had been there. It was quite a core group that had been there for a while, but it's still not easy because they're all at different clubs. I think loads of people have spoken about the golden generation and how like they're so split, when they sit down and they had the different teams were in different spots and didn't talk to each other. I think that's slightly it's very different now. But even the biggest thing now with other countries, and I'm sure the same for ours, but it's how to manage players, because you look at the French team, you've got like Mbappe. He wants to be star man, and you've got Dembele.
I was going to say, how do you get individual champions to come together as a team?
Yeah,
I'm
really
fascinated with this because this is sort of a challenge I face in business, I guess. So, what's the unlock?
The manager plays the biggest role, because if you look at, for instance, Paris Saint-Germain, they've got that core values that everyone works for the team. No one answers back. If they come off, they all want the next person to come on and do well because they built this thing about it's the team. Whereas other clubs or other individuals maybe have looked and gone, well, I want to be star man and I want to play every week and I want to do this. And it's about them. And I think you can get away with that to a certain amount. But then when it comes to the elite, everyone has to be bought into that one thing.
Okay.
And that is manager, it is environment. And that comes from people having to maybe swallow a little bit of pride sometimes and going, well, I need to do that and that will help the team. Whereas they don't want to do that because they feel like I want to either score the goal or do this. Whereas if you look at the elite, they all work together. They all want to help each other.
Yeah.
And you might not want to do that because if they do that, they might get the plaudits. So I want the plaudits, so I'll do that. You can't necessarily see it if you're outside of the football, but when you're in it and you've been around players and these situations, you can just see it, you can spot it. When you watch games, you're like, oh, he's not played that ball then because actually he probably doesn't want him to score, which is awful to say.
Yeah.
But you're like, hey, he's put him wide there. Why is he put him wide? Or he's probably wanting him to then pass it back to him to score. Just
so
silly little things.
The star has to become the team, right?
Yeah.
And not the individual.
Yeah. But it is really difficult to do that in such a short space. The World Cup's slightly different because you're then together, hopefully, for a longer period of time.
Yeah.
When you have 2 international games, it's over like 10 days.
Yeah.
Or, slightly less sometimes. Your first game's after about 4 days. So it's really difficult to just embrace it all, go. And if that team's been together a fair bit, then you've got a bit of an understanding, you've got a bit of a core group that knows what the manager wants and how he wants his team to be. And also, nowadays, a lot of the players know each other because they've been at, if they don't know them individually, they've been at a club with someone else who knows him and everyone knows. So it's a lot smaller now, whereas when I went, I suppose, everyone was all together and I'd not been with any of these players before. Well, they completely embraced me and they were brilliant, absolutely brilliant with me. And to answer your question, did I feel when you get them? I had a message from John Terry, who's the captain of England, the day that I made my debut, saying, you deserve to be here. Go and embrace, go and give it everything. And you think, if that's a real nice thing to have received from the England captain to actually feel like you do deserve to be there and to go and show what you're about. That's another little.
Exactly. And I remember you saying, again, when we were chatting before this, that, sometimes the changing room sort of sorted things out. What did you mean by that? Because I thought that was an interesting comment.
Well, definitely when I was at West Ham, I'm sure I remember doing it as well at Wolves, but what if we were having a bad spell or there was a bad game or something, we'd call like a team meeting. And the captain at the time was Kevin Nolan. And he would be like, right, so there was no staff, no managers. You would come in and it would be, right, we're sorting it out now. Anyone that doesn't really want to be involved in this group, leave. And everyone else is in. And as a team, you'd tell a few home truths. And then it would be, for instance, if, I'm, just off the top of my head, you say, like, if you're a striker and you're not scoring, you'd be like, right, how can we help you score? What do you need from us to get you scored? When I'm getting to the byline, where do you want the ball or what do you want to do? And then you tell them, and then you can, right, if we're doing that, you need to do your end of the bargain. And the same for me, if I was like, well, I need the ball, so I need to speak to my centre forward, my centre mid, my left back to give me the ball, midfielder. And you'd sort of work it out like, right, if I'm here, I need you to pass me the ball, or I would like you to do this, and you can help. If I'm here, I need your striker to bounce it off and then to get wide. And if I was putting the crosses in, Sam Allardyce told everyone I had 3 crosses. If I'm going down the line, I dink it to the far post, which in his words was the POMO, point of maximum opportunity. That's where all the goals were scored. And then you had the low whip one, and then you would cut back to the penalty spot. They were the 3 crosses if I was going down the line. And then I had to cut back to a cross on my right, and then it would just be, if everyone missed it, it was going in at the far post. So everyone knew where the ball was going to go. So you had to make them runs.
Yeah.
So you would try and break it down like that, and then it would be, right, this is what's happening. Are you in it with me? And you had like some really experienced players. You had James Collins as well at the back, and Winston Reid, and Kev in middle, Andy Colton up front. You had Mark Noble and Jack Collison at the time as well. This was that sort of group, and you would hold people accountable, and we'd have a plan and move forward, and it would be like, right, that's us as a team.
Yeah.
And you'd all feel like you'd be in it together.
I was going to say, because what you're kind of talking about is the importance of a team self-policing itself almost, but also the conditions for that almost like healthy conflict, I think. And I think what I'm reading is that the healthy conflict for you was just being able to have that open discussion, but also a sense of kind of ownership. So I'm not just going to criticize you, but I'm also going to ask you what you need. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, I think that with them players as well that I mentioned and the rest in that group, I think I was, again, more of the quiet one, I suppose, in that. But I think they knew that I would do the hard work.
Yeah.
And so if they told me what to do, I would go and do it.
Yeah.
But being able to self-police was huge. And it just, you'd be able to look at someone and go, right, yeah, actually they're in it with. We used to say, like, in the trenches, are you in the trenches with us? Because if I turn around and you're not there, there's something wrong. So you'd feel like you'd have that from your teammates.
Yeah.
And that was a strong core of groups of players, and that was a really good group that was able to then, I think we finished 10th in our first season, which for a promoted side was a huge deal. And a lot of that was down to just not team spirit, but the togetherness and being able to just do the hard graft and do the stuff that people would think is standard, but it's not if you don't get it right.
And have the difficult conversations.
Yeah, to have the difficult
well.
conversations. I think there's, lots of players in there were able to do it. I wouldn't necessarily say that was me. That wasn't my strength, but I was able to be in that environment and soak it up and be able to know what I needed to do and be told what I needed to do. And I've always been quite good. If someone tells me to go and do something, I'll go and do it.
Yeah.
I'm quite receptive of that. So in that environment, it worked quite well.
Yeah. And just on that England experience before we kind of move on to West Ham, I guess, did that change for you your perception of who you were as a player, and also what impact did it have in terms of how you were viewed as a player, once you went back?
Yeah, I mean, did it change me? Absolutely not. No, I loved, I tried to embrace it as much as possible, like soak everything in from playing to the feeling I was at Wembley in front of 80,000 people. All my friends and family were there, and loads of Gills fans, Wolves fans were all there. So I tried to soak it up as much as possible. But the best thing that happened was, again, what I say about Mick McCarthy is when I went back to training, like the next day, Mick McCarthy pulled me aside and was like, "Look, amazing, congratulations! This is you've done incredibly well. You're England international, but now you're not just Matt Jarvis that plays for Wolves. You're now England international Matt Jarvis that plays for Wolves, and now you're going to be, you're going to have to adapt your game because people are going to be raising their levels to play against you because you're an England player now."
And did you feel that?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I remember. I can't remember if it was the next game or a couple of games after. I played Newcastle away, and I was just getting doubled up on all the time. I couldn't, get on the ball.
How did you adapt to that?
Well, again, this is where I mentioned about Terry Connor and things. You have to adapt because I wasn't receiving the ball. There's people doubling up, so you have to manoeuvre where you change your game of how you receive or where you receive the ball, what you're going to do. And I had to work really hard on it. Because it was really difficult. It was really difficult.
Yeah.
And then, obviously, as we mentioned before, expectation levels have risen now because I'm now not just playing for Wolves who's fighting relegation. I'm now an England international. So that expectation level rises, which I put as much pressure on myself more than anyone else.
Yeah.
But there definitely is more pressure on you. So that's something you have to deal with as well.
Yeah.
But I suppose with that, it come to a point that I was got back to playing really well.
Yeah.
And
I was going to say, do you think with that pressure, either people crumble or it makes you better?
Yeah, but it can take time. Yeah, and you say about crumble, it's because it's maybe the player's not changed.
Yeah.
But now the expectations levels have gone.
Yeah.
And now there's more eyes on it that you get not exposed, but you get. People probably didn't notice that previously because they saw either you scored or you did something else. They just see them. But now, because you've made that adjustment to playing internationally, people pick up on a lot of other things. But for me, it took me a period that I was like, wow, I can't get the ball here. And when I do, there's two people on me, so I can't do what I used to do. So it was an adjustment.
Yeah.
But then I got back to playing well, and I think we unfortunately didn't play that well as a team. And then Mick unfortunately got sacked, and the last 13 games, I think I scored 7 goals and played really well individually. Couldn't help the team not get relegated, but as an individual, I did really well, which then resulted in me in getting my move to West Ham. But
And the pressure was there as well, because
Yeah,
it was
well,
a
the pressure for me,
record signing.
I mean,
and-
before we even go into that, the pressure was there because I was desperate to get back into the England squad.
Okay.
Because I played in March and I needed to try and I was either, getting into that squad and going to the Euros, I think it was, or I was getting married.
Right.
So I got married, which was great. But yeah, I was desperate. There's always certain things that you want to achieve. Once you have a taste of it, you're desperate to get back in. And to only have the one cap is amazing.
Yeah.
But you're constantly wanting more. So it's just desperately trying to keep doing that. And we say about purpose, and that was, I was wanting to do my best for Wolves and try and stay up as best we possibly could. But then you're also thinking, well, I need to continue to play well personally as well. And then you say about pressure. Yeah, going to West Ham for club record signing is definitely that. West Ham fans are very passionate. It's an amazing club, and I think because it's London as well, everything gets magnified. I say about media duties, when I was at Wolves, we used to, with the Premier League, you have to do loads of media, but it was more than double when you go to West Ham. Like, you have to go and do all of these different things and do this paper, this radio, this, that, and then you go and do this in the foundation, this over there. There's so many things within the community.
Yeah. How did you maintain the sort of love for it and the focus for the actual game as well when you've got all those additional distractions around?
I don't think I ever really struggled with
No.
that. Football is the most important thing.
Yeah.
We've got this thing in the house. It was like this marriage is interrupted by the football season. But unfortunately it was, because you could have a Sunday off and then suddenly you lose on the Saturday. Manager pulls you in and you can't go. Oh, actually, I've got plans on Sunday.
Yeah.
There's not. You're in. So I was fully in it and immersed in it, and so I never really got I didn't get distracted from that. I loved it. There's no other reason for it. I loved it. It's the most amazing thing you could ever do.
Yeah.
It's the best job in brackets in the world. It really is, because you're doing something you love every single day. But there's so many other obstacles that come with it. We talk about pressure, we can talk about performance, you can talk about social media, you can talk about just lifestyle, anything that going out, there's so many things I'll bring up with regards to that as well. But just pure pressure on being record signing as well was huge, because you want to impress because you're going to a new team. I didn't necessarily know many of the players. I played against them, yes, but I didn't know them individually on a personal level. So you're wanting to, one, get on with them, because not everyone gets on with everyone.
No.
That's, everyone thinks this, they're teammates. No, not everyone has to like each other, but you have to have that common ground of having that team as a togetherness. So
how do you build that togetherness though?
Again, for the greater goal of a team.
Because of a strong purpose.
And I'm not saying that this was at Wolves, West Ham as well either, by the way, but that is there. Not everyone can get on with everyone, but as long as you've got that core identity of, right, this is the purpose, this is our goal for us as a team, and everyone can be on board with that. You don't have to like people. Not everyone speaks the same language. So you can't necessarily talk to people. But your common thing is playing football, and then once you're on the pitch, you get an understanding of where you want the ball, or where I want the ball, and you sort of can identify with football, and so that's where you build that team aura and everything together.
And when you're at that level, obviously, as you've spoken about it a little bit before at kind of Wolves, that you started to have access to sort of more holistic training, so nutrition and sort of strength and sort of the kind of mental side as well. So was there any work that you were doing at that point on the kind of mental side of the game? And what did that look like?
So I was one of them when it first came into Wolves. It's difficult because you've got a big group of players, and you come in and someone comes in and tries to get everyone to do it. Well, not everyone wants to do it, for one. No one, And then you've got big personalities in change rooms that potentially don't want to do it, that then can influence a lot of other people. So again, when I say about trying to be my own person, if this, whatever we were going to do from a sports science, psychology type thing, if that was going to help me by 1%, I was going to do it.
Yeah.
So I had that outlook on it, and there was only a few of us that probably did it to start with. And then, we still did team sessions and did
And when you
that.
say did it, what kind of work were you
So,
doing?
I mean, to start with, it was more like we did like visualization. We did night before games. We would do like more of a visualization, but trying to get you into a nice state to get some good rest. Then you would have like visualizing the game, visualizing set pieces. For instance, I used to take set pieces like corners, free kicks. So you'd visualize walking up and striking the ball, but you'd be thinking about the weather, you'd be thinking about the temperature, where you're putting your foot. You can hear people in the crowd, everything, so that when you come to the game, you've done it 1,000 times, and you'd know what you were going to do, and it just came natural. And then you progress on to different things. For me, I used to love, I had certain music that I'd listen to before games. You then start, people talk about superstitions. I don't necessarily say they're superstitions. I would say they're structure. It's a habit, and it's my checklist that I would go through before I go to a game.
And what sort of things would be on there?
Well, so like I would listen to music. I'd watch videos of me scoring goals.
Okay. Yeah.
Putting crosses in, positive reinforcement before a game. I'd like to, if we were doing a match day, for instance, I would have the same pre-match meal. I would have, which, if you wanted to know, was a piece of toast with peanut butter and scrambled eggs on top.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Which
interesting combo.
Yeah, but it's got everything you possibly need. And that's built over, it's not just I just decided to do it one day. That's built up over years, because I didn't like to be too full. So, sometimes you'd eat too much and then you felt heavy and lethargic in the game. Sometimes I'd eat too little and need a bit more energy. So I built up a core group of what I liked, and that were all different foods, but I come together with, I would have a piece of toast with peanut butter, because you had carbs and fats and that, and then I'd have the protein and everything with the eggs, and that was right for me.
Yeah.
So many people have so many different things, but that was what I built up, and that's what I had.
Okay.
But then I'd like to get I had strap-ins on my ankles, so I'd like to get them done first, early, once you get into change rooms. And then I'd go through my routine, as I'd do core, I'd do stretching, stability, get myself going with a bit of activation. Then we would go out for warm up, and then I'd come back in, and then I'd be ready for the game then, but I wouldn't put my shirt on till the last minute, because in a weird way, again, it was more trying to self-promote myself to make me feel confident going into a game. So I'd hold my shirt up in front of me with Jarvis and whatever number I had on, whatever club it was, and I'd just be like, that is amazing, like I'm playing football.
Yeah.
It's my name on the back.
Yeah. That's really nice, that kind of gratitude, really, that sense of gratitude all the time for where you were.
And I'd go to I want to go out the change room last as well. Again, it built up over years, and I'd go and I'd walk out last, and I'd put my shirt on just as walking out the change room. Some people would be say, because I was too vain, I'd want to just show off. But I did do it for that. I probably had a little bit of the other as well. But just to see it, and I'd put my shirt on as I walked out the change room.
It's kind of about routines that are just sort of stabilising you, grounding 100%. You, really.
And then you used to go out, and if you had I remember Vazte at West Ham used to like go out last as well. So you used to have like a little bit of like
a nudge.
You'd go to walk out, and then you'd suddenly like, oh, I've just got to go and grab something, and then you go back and he'll do the same, and the manager would be like, just get out. But then I used to walk out, and then I used to do 3 sprints before the game, and then I would be ready.
Yeah.
And I'd gone back, and I'd gone, yep, done. And I was in a place that I was like, right, I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
And if there's some change rooms that you couldn't do this, and there was that, and if I didn't do a certain thing, it wasn't like, oh, I'm going to play rubbish today. It was just like, I had my little checklist of what things I like to do before the game. Some players would get changed like 5 minutes before they go out, and just be chatting away and sitting and doing whatever. It just wasn't me. I had to have done my routine and done the stuff that I wanted to do before the game.
Yeah, and Matt, I've loved hearing about all the incredible successes that you've had in your career, and I guess what's really incredible about you is that you always kind of relied on that sort of work hard, that sort of standards. But then I think as well later on in your career that you started to kind of be impacted by injury. So just explain also what happened from that perspective.
Yeah, when I went to Norwich, I started so well. I went on loan to Norwich. I scored in my first game, scored in my second game, was absolutely flying. And then I did something that I don't normally do, and that was tackle. And I tackled Yaya Toure, who's a big guy, and I hurt my knee. And I was out for about 10, 11 weeks with my knee. I'd done my deep fibre MCL, and I got myself back, and I played the rest of that season, and my knee was never right. I had so many injections and stuff to play, because you just want to play.
Yeah.
You look and hear so many stories about people, and why would you do that? It's like, well, if I didn't play, someone else was going to play, and I wanted to play. I was desperate to play football. It's what I've lived and breathed. That's why I'm here. So you'd do anything to play. And then at the end of that, my knee was really bad, and I couldn't really kick the ball. I couldn't really walk. So in the first week of pre-season, I had to have an operation, and I went in and they found that my medial wasn't actually attached properly. So I'd played 6 months in the Premier League like that, and then had an operation. I got back in the 3 months that I was supposed to do, and then first training session, I hurt my ankle, cut inside and shot, and someone smashed my ankle. But because I'd been out for so long, I was like, it's fine, I crack on. I had injections to get through the international break. Yep, jab, get back into training. But it was really poor, like really sore, sorry. And all the scans were just like, oh, it's inflammation. So I just carried on. And then the manager got sacked, and there was like a weird sort of time period there where I wasn't really involved. I was trying to train. And it was difficult.
Yeah.
And then anyway, I did more injections all through the summer, come back pre-season, and it was the same thing. And then I had to have an operation. And again, when they went in, I was going to be hopefully back in about 6 weeks. When I went in, on the scans, it shows that all the cartilage is like that, and it was just all red and inflamed. But when they went in and touched it, it all fell off. So that's how I could play majority, and then when I did certain things, the cartilage would fall off, and then I was just bone on bone. So I had to have what's called a microfracture, where they drill holes in the bone, and that bleeds, and that sets, and that's my fibrous tissue. And I was out for a long time with that. And then I picked up IT band friction syndrome because of all my ops were on my right leg. I started walking different, started running different. So they didn't want to waste time on that, so I had an operation straight away on that. And that process was about 2.5 years.
Yeah. And
if I say that's the worst part of my whole life, let alone football, it would be an understatement.
Yeah.
It was awful. One, because I was in pain every single day. I couldn't walk.
Yeah.
2, I was away from my wife and my newborn son.
Yeah.
So for his first sort of real 2 years, really, they could have lived up with me, but they, there was just family life. It was just easier for them to be down south with help around them. So I missed, I got back as often as they came up as often, but I was injured. I was in 6 out of 7 days. Didn't know really when my day off was going to be. It was just sort of a day that, all right, you can have tomorrow off. So that was difficult.
Yeah.
Then I was doing absolutely everything. And when I say I was working hard to get myself back, I absolutely was.
Yeah.
I dedicated everything to, I missed out on, I say about sacrifice, we say about all of these things. I missed out on my son growing up because I was that focused on getting myself fit and getting myself back.
Can I ask you a question? Like, looking back, was that sacrifice worth it, do you think?
Yeah. Selfishly, yes.
Yeah. And what was it that at that point you were fighting for? Because you'd had already an incredible career. So what were you fighting to get back to? Or what was...
I was, again, I wanted to play football.
Yeah.
That was my wife, tells me all the time. She was like, just, stop. Like, you can't keep doing this to yourself, and you're going to hopefully be able to play in the garden with your kids as they grow up, and as I've got another knee up at the end of this month. But I was drilled. I wanted to play football. I was only 31. I was 30 when I signed there, I think. I was 31, so 32. I was coming to 33. I was like, I still got enough. I'm still fit. I want to play.
Yeah.
So I was like, the sacrifice had to be worth it.
Yeah.
And I had to get myself fit. When I was at Norwich, I got offered a year's money to go. The specialists told me to retire because they said that's the best my ankle was going to be. I said no to everything because one, I didn't want to get paid up and go because I was still injured. I couldn't walk. So I still wanted to get obviously the training, the physios, but I was still wanted to play for Norwich. I still wanted to play. And then the specialists obviously telling me I should retire was more of I was just desperate to get back. I was, again, we talk about, this is the first time I started experiencing like, Norwich fans weren't necessarily pleased because I was, I was injured. And they weren't necessarily getting and the club were trying to protect me, but they weren't necessarily getting updated on when I was going to be back. And then I was getting myself back, and then I'd pick up another little 10 days, like little grade 1 they call them, so little groin, little little quad, little something, and I'd be out for another 10 days, and everyone like, it's only 10 days, and I'm like, it's not 10 days, this is 2.5 years. And so then that's where it's really hard mentally to try and just go, it's only 10 days. Well, it's not. This is 2.5 years, and now it's another 10 days. And every little bump was like, even though it was a little bump, it's a massive speed bump for me, and it was really hard to get through.
Because up to that point you'd been Matt the footballer, Matt the very successful footballer, and was there a sense of losing your identity at that point, or did you?
I didn't look at it like that. No, I'd say that's more a little bit later when you start to finish playing. Definitely that happens, but at that time it was just Matt the playing person. Because I'd have to sit and, like, when you're injured, I was in the treatment room or in the gym, and you look out onto the training field. There's glass everywhere. You look out, and all you can see is everyone else doing what you want to do, and it's really difficult. Really difficult.
How did you adapt to that then?
I found it difficult. I found it very hard.
Was it just that purpose still that you've got to get back, got to get?
Yeah, again, I'm still on that hamster wheel. And when you're injured, it's all about checkpoints and like, right, it's say it was like a 10-week injury. Well, I'm 4 weeks in. Where am I supposed to be at 4 weeks? Am I front, behind? Where am I? And then you get to 10 weeks. I should be playing now, but you're not, or you are. It depends on the situation. So you're constantly, and each day you come in, and for me, mine were major operations and long periods of time. So each day you come in, how's it feel? Well, it feels exactly the same as you asked me yesterday. So you start getting frustrated. You start getting, you're just waiting for that big turning point, which is not there.
I was going to say, there's lots of athletes that do, kind of come up against injury through their careers. Like, what kind of one piece of advice would you give to anyone that's in that situation now, or kind of battling with that?
I think the biggest thing, as I mentioned earlier, about you're allowed to feel down, sad, angry, disappointed. You're allowed, because you're going to have setbacks, but it's about being able to process that and then moving on quite quickly. So I say about 2 weeks at Gillingham, I'd moved on. Like now here, when I got told like that was the best that they could do with I had the weekend off, and then I come back in, I was like, right, let's go. But it's being able to process it and then having a positive impact for the next bit.
It's almost like the stories that you tell yourself, really.
And yes, they're difficult. And I lived up on my own. I was going that routine. I say, like, every day I'd get up, I'd go into training, do everything that I could possibly do. I'd go back. I was the first one in, last one out, and go and sit at home, have my dinner, sit and watch something on telly, and then go to bed. Repeat. I wasn't having a good time. And fans used to go and say like, oh, he's injured, what's he doing? I'm like, you come in one day and have one day with me and do what I do and see if it's a good day. You see what I can see, what I do to try and get myself back fit. But that was my drive, and it was my purpose of like sun, football, everything that made me do absolutely everything, because I wanted that to mean something. I wanted to come back and be fit and to go and play, and for it to all be worth it.
When you retired, were you ready? Do you think you were ready at that point?
No, I'd still want to play now, really, if I could, but I know I can't.
And
I think it was the right call. I think when you start towards the end, you've got to, you still got to love it, which I did. Your body's still got to be able to do it, which it probably wasn't.
No.
And they were going back to full time the following year, and I think that was something I definitely couldn't do. And I then look and I think, well, I then have 2 kids. body's not exactly in the best place. I've still got to then have a life after football.
Yeah.
So that sort of, and I think I'd sort of justified why I did everything that I did to myself.
Yeah.
You know, because ultimately I was being selfish to carry on playing
Yeah.
and to put myself through it.
Yeah. And so tell me, who is Matt Jarvis now? So, you know, because adaptability has almost been one of your kind of strengths throughout your career. Has that served you now? And what do you tell people you do when people ask you?
Well, weirdly, I've just come back from America, and the guy, when we were going through customs, and he said, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was stumped for a minute, and I was like, "Oh, I'm self-employed," and he said, "So what do you do?" And I was like, but it was because it was like, I've never really had to label anything, you know, really. I just played football. And then afterwards I do loads of different things.
Yeah.
And I was like, I did the media and the punditry, and I do some mentoring. And he was like, okay. And I was like, but it was like, so I definitely feel like nothing gets spoken about enough, that transition from playing to not.
Yeah.
Because it's huge.
Do you get support for that?
You can.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's one that everyone goes, yes, yes, yes. But and not to the same degree, but I'd say it's very like being in the army. Because you're regimented, you've got structure, purpose every single day, and then suddenly there's nothing. And I say it's not the same because I'm not going to war or anything, but you've been told what to do, where to be, what to eat, when to eat for 20 odd years, and then suddenly you've got nothing. And as much as you can get the tiny violin out for me, it's a big change. One as well for me, just for me personally, I lived away from home for 4.5, 5 years. Then to move back in is a massive change.
Yeah.
Have 2 kids, you know, obviously you've got to think about it as well. It was that COVID year. It was after COVID, it's all been a bit weird. And so that's a big transition. And then purpose, I think, is the biggest thing, you know, because I hate doing nothing.
Yeah.
I like, even like silly things, like if I've got a day off and I'm like, what needs doing? I'm like, can someone just give me a list of things to do? Because I want to get things done, because I hate.
Yeah. Where are you finding that purpose now then?
Well, I love what I do. I do loads of different things.
Yeah.
So I do the media, the punditry, the co-commentary things, which I really love. And I'm an ambassador at West Ham, which is amazing because you feel a little bit part of a team again. I see ex-players. They've got loads of ex-players that are at West Ham, so it's nice to be in that and sort of be in that football environment still a little bit. I mentor players, which it's been great because, you know, they're going through what I've been through, to give them that advice, not to tell them what to do, but to guide them and give them, like, well, in my experience, this, and this. And then I'm a director of a golf events company, which is phenomenal. I never played golf while I played football, which I regret now.
Okay.
But so I'm doing that, which is amazing. And I've got loads of other bits that are coming up.
Yeah. And I know, and this is kind of a last question from me, and I know it's going to be quite a hard one, because if you take all of the lessons that you've kind of learned throughout your career, you know, the kind of work hard, adaptability, you know, if you could have put your arm around a sort of 16-year-old Matt who just got, you know, knocked out of the academy system, you know, and given him 1 or 2 pieces of advice, what would you have said to him back then?
Do you know what? The thing is, everyone, I think it's a slightly different question, but everyone said, what would you change? I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah.
I wouldn't change anything, because what I've experienced and the way I've done it is I've started at the bottom. I've worked myself all the way to the top to get to the pinnacle, playing for your country. And then I've had, like, definitely a different journey of going down and injuries and ups and downs all the way through. But I wouldn't change anything, because it's made me who I am today.
Yeah.
And that experience of that 2.5 years going through hell has definitely made me a different person. And you sort of evaluate different things and you go through. So I would say enjoy the journey. Don't get too high, don't get too low. And you've got to back yourself the whole way.
Yeah.
Because there's definitely going to be moments that you're not going to.
Yeah.
But you really have to, because everyone's out for themselves, and you've got to concentrate on number one and make sure that you're the best that you can be.
Yeah.
That's why I said earlier about, I can look back and know that I couldn't have done any more to eke out any more out of myself. You know, I gave it my best, and that's why I don't have any regrets. And I can look back and go, I'm happy, you know, within reason. I'm happy that I can look back and like that, because it would be awful to look back and, oh, if I just tried a bit hard, or if I just put a bit more effort in, I could have done this. Or, no, that's awful.
Yeah. Well, Matt, I've definitely enjoyed hearing about your journey. It's a fantastic career, and congratulations. And, very best of luck with whatever it is that you decide to go on to next. And no doubt it'll be many, many different things. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you. Absolute pleasure.